The day Lena's husband stood at the kitchen doorway and told her she was imagining things, she was holding a bank alert on her phone for a transfer she never made, $12,000. Gone, to an account she had never seen before. He smiled at her the way someone smiles when they are absolutely certain you will believe them. And she almost did. She had been almost believing him for 6 years. But this time there was a number on a screen, and numbers do not change their story depending on who is in the room. Lena did not scream, she did not cry. She set her phone face down on the counter, looked at her husband, and asked him one question. He answered it, and in that moment, without him knowing it, everything was already over. Before this story goes any further, think about this. Lena did not walk into this knowing what was happening. She walked in trusting completely. She covered for people, made excuses for people, and gave the benefit of the doubt so many times that it became a habit she could not break. So here's the question this story is going to ask you from the very first minute to the very last. How long is too long? How many signs does a person miss before staying becomes something they chose, not something that was done to them? Sit with that, because Lena had to sit with it too. If this kind of story hits you somewhere real, stay until the end. You will want to see exactly what she did next. Lena grew up in a house where love was proven through patience. Her mother used to say that good people endure quietly and the world eventually notices. Lena carried that into her adult life like a rule she had memorized so well she stopped questioning whether it was actually true. She was 31 when she married Daniel. She was patient, she was organized, she paid attention to details. She remembered birthdays, kept the pantry stocked, tracked every bill, and still found time to work full-time at a property management company downtown. She was not naive, she was thorough. That is what made the next 6 years so painful to look back on. Daniel was charming when they met. He worked in sales, which should have meant something in hindsight, but at the time it just meant he was good at talking to people and making a room feel lighter. He was attentive. He remembered the little things early on. He brought coffee the way she liked it without being asked. He showed up on time. He sent messages during the day just to check in. Lena told her closest friend, a woman named Rita, that Daniel was the first man who made her feel like she was worth the effort. Rita smiled and said she hoped that stayed true. It stayed true for about 2 years. The first shift was small. Daniel started coming home later, not wildly late, not dramatically late, just an extra hour here, an extra hour there. He said work was picking up. Lena believed him. She was working long hours too, so she understood. She kept their home running smoothly, handled the shared household account, paid what needed to be paid, and kept herself busy enough not to overthink the silence that was slowly growing between them. Then came the money questions that were not really questions. Daniel started asking Lena to cover things. First, it was a car repair because his bonus had been delayed. Then a family trip deposit because he wanted to surprise his mother and the timing was bad. Then a dental bill. Then a few rounds of what he called bridging costs when a deal at work fell through. Lena paid. Each time he promised to transfer it back. Each time she said not to worry about it. She was genuinely not worried. They were married. It was one account feeding another. Except it was not one account. Lena did not discover that right away. She discovered something smaller first. A weekend away that Daniel had planned for them both was canceled the night before because of a last-minute client meeting. Lena was disappointed but understanding. She stayed home, ordered food, and watched movies by herself. A week later, she ran into her neighbor's daughter, a college student named Gracie, who mentioned casually that she had seen Daniel at the waterfront resort north of the city that same weekend. She thought Lena had been with him. She said the place looked beautiful. Lena smiled and said yes, it was lovely. She drove home with her hands tight on the wheel. She did not confront Daniel immediately. This was the part that would later make people say she should have done it sooner. But Lena was methodical. She was not the kind of person who accused without knowing. She needed to understand what she was looking at before she opened her mouth because she had been taught that accusations without proof destroyed relationships and destroyed people, and she still, even then, believed that maybe there was an explanation she had not thought of yet. So she started paying attention differently. She began noticing things she had been too trusting to notice before. Daniel's second P. Phone, which he said was a work phone, was always kept face down or pocketed immediately when he walked through the door. He had started changing his personal phone passcode every few weeks, something he used to never do. He paid for certain purchases in cash only, which was strange because he had always preferred cards. And twice in 1 month, she found him in the car in the driveway, finishing a call, not coming in until the call was done. None of these things alone meant anything definitive. Together they were a pattern. Lena wrote them down. She dated each observation in a small notebook she kept in her work bag, not because she planned to do anything with it yet, just because something in her gut said this is real and she needed to trust that instinct enough to document it. The bank alert arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. Lena was at her desk at work when her phone buzzed. It was a notification from the joint account app, the account they both contributed to for household expenses. The notification said a transfer of $12,000 had been made at 11:42 the previous night. The receiving account number was not one she recognized. She opened the app. The transfer was there. It was listed under Daniel's access log. She texted him, "Did you make a transfer from the joint account last night?" He replied 40 minutes later, "What transfer? Number must be a system glitch. Call the bank." She called the bank. The bank confirmed the transfer was made manually, not a glitch, and was completed and cleared. When Lena told the representative that she had not authorized it, the representative said both account holders had transfer permissions unless they had a restriction in place, which they did not. Lena asked to have a hold placed on any future transfers above $500 without both account holders confirming by phone. The representative processed it. Then Lena sat at her desk for 15 minutes without moving, and she made a decision that would take months to fully carry out but would eventually give her the only kind of freedom that actually lasts. She did not tell Daniel she had spoken to the bank. That evening she came home, made dinner, and listened to him talk about his day. He mentioned the bank alert himself, rolling his eyes, saying the app was always glitching and she should not stress about it. He said he would look into it. Lena nodded and said thank you. She watched him eat. She watched him pour his second glass of wine. She thought about the notebook in her bag and the bank representative's voice confirming manual entry. She slept 4 hours that night. The next morning, she called Rita before work. Rita was not the kind of friend who said everything would be fine. She was the kind of friend who asked the right questions and then waited for the honest answer. Lena told her about the transfer, she told her about the resort, she told her about the notebook. Rita was quiet for a moment and then said, "Lena, you already know what this is. You are just waiting to be sure enough that no one can call you wrong." That was it exactly. Over the next 3 weeks, Lena moved carefully. She did not change her behavior toward Daniel. She continued to cook and clean and ask about his day and maintain the surface of their marriage. Inside, she was building a picture. She called her company's legal department contact, a sharp woman named Carol, and asked hypothetically about the process of separating joint financial accounts in a marriage. Carol said hypothetically was fine but recommended Lena speak to a family law attorney sooner rather than later and gave her a name. Lena made an appointment for 2 weeks out. In the meantime, she went through 2 years of bank records. She had access to all of it through the joint account online portal, and Daniel had apparently never thought about that or never thought she would look. What she found was not one transfer, it was 14. Not all of them were large, some were $500, some were $2,000. The $12,000 had been the biggest so far. The total across 2 years came to just over $41,000. All sent to the same account number. Lena printed every record. She organized them by date. She put them in a manila folder in her work bag. She did not cry until she was in the parking garage that evening, alone in her car, looking at the number 41,000 written in her own handwriting on the outside of the folder. Then she cried for 7 minutes by the clock on the dashboard. Then she wiped her face, drove home, and made pasta. 2 days later, she found the second thing. She had been looking through old emails, specifically the shared email account they used for household admin like insurance and utilities and subscriptions. Daniel had stopped using it in the last year, which Lena now understood was probably intentional, but older emails were still there. She found one from 14 months ago from a property rental service. It was a booking confirmation for a 2-bedroom apartment. The name on the booking was Daniel's, the address was across town. The rental period was 11 months, the total was listed. It was not a hotel, it was not a business trip, it was an apartment. An apartment he had rented while living in their house. Lena copied the email to her personal account. She noted the address. She did not drive by it, not yet. She filed it. She met with the family law attorney, a calm woman named Patricia, who told Lena she had done exactly the right thing by documenting everything before saying a word. Patricia said that in cases where financial transfers of marital assets occurred without joint consent, there were legal remedies, including a claim for dissipation of marital assets, which could affect how the division of finances was calculated. Patricia said $41,000 in documented undisclosed transfers was significant. She told Lena not to tip her hand. She told her to gather the rest of what she could. Patricia also mentioned something that shifted the entire weight of the situation. She said, "Has your husband discussed any upcoming changes to your living arrangement? Any large purchases, refinancing, or plans involving the house?" Lena said no. Patricia said, "Look into it." On the way home that evening, Lena stopped at a coffee shop and opened her laptop. She searched the county property records database. Their house was listed, both names were on the title, but there was a filing from 8 weeks ago, a refinance inquiry, sole applicant, Daniel's name only. He had tried to refinance the house without her. The application had been denied. She could see that from the record status, but he had tried. He had listed himself as sole owner on the application, their house that both of them had paid into for 4 years. Lena closed her laptop and sat very still for a long time. She thought about what her mother used to say, good people endure quietly and the world eventually notices. She thought about all the quiet enduring she had done, the excuses she had made, the money she had covered, the weekends alone, the face-down phone, the late nights, the gas money, the dental bill, the family trip deposit she had paid for a trip to visit his mother that she had not even been invited to join. She thought about the apartment across town. She thought about the woman or person or life she still did not fully know what she was looking at that the apartment represented. She thought about the $41,000. She thought about her own name missing from a refinance application on a house she helped pay for. And then she stopped thinking about all of it as a collection of painful discoveries and started seeing it as what it actually was. A system, a long, patient, well-organized system of taking. She had not been a wife in this system, she had been a resource, a stable income, a home manager, a cover story, a person who stayed and covered the bills while something else was built somewhere else with her money. She paid her coffee and went home. She did not let anything show. This was the part that would later surprise people most. That Lena, after knowing all of this, went home and cooked dinner and sat across from Daniel and talked about nothing in particular for the rest of the evening, and he never saw a single sign. The mask she wore was not built from anger or performance. It was built from all the years of practice she had unknowingly been getting, all the years of smiling through a feeling she could not name. She had already been wearing the mask, she just finally knew she was wearing it. 2 days after finding the property record, she drove past the apartment address. It was a clean building, newer construction, small balconies on each unit. She parked down the street. She watched for 12 minutes. She did not need to watch long. At 7 minutes, Daniel walked out of the building entrance. He was not alone. The woman beside him was young, maybe late 20s, and she was carrying a grocery bag and talking to him with the ease of someone completely comfortable in a shared space. He held the building door open. He touched the small of her back. They walked together toward the parking lot. Lena took 2 photos with her phone. Not because she needed proof for herself, she already had proof for herself. She took them because she knew that later, in rooms with attorneys and possibly with family members, someone was going to call her dramatic, someone was going to suggest she had misread things, someone was going to question her. She wanted to have every single answer ready. She drove home and called Patricia. Patricia said, "Good, now we move to the next step." The next step involved Lena opening a personal account in her name only at a different bank the following morning. She transferred her personal direct deposit to the new account. She removed her automatic contributions to the joint AC account. She left exactly what she owed for her share of the joint bills, calculated to the dollar, in the joint account and nothing more. Daniel had been pulling extra from that account for 2 years. That was done. Patricia had walked her through exactly how to do this without triggering any legal issue on Lena's end. Since both parties had equal claim to their own income and equal right to redirect where their paycheck went. Over the next week, Lena also quietly made a list of every asset in the marriage. The house, both cars, the joint savings, a small investment account they had opened 2 years ago, household items of value, her personal savings, and a small piece of inherited land in her grandmother's name that had been transferred to Lena the previous year. Patricia told her the inherited land was protected as separate property. Lena had not even thought to be worried about it until that conversation. Then she checked whether Daniel had. She went back through emails in the shared account. She found nothing about the land directly, but she found a forwarded email Daniel had sent to an address she did not recognize from 18 months ago, forwarding the letter from the county deed office confirming the land transfer into Lena's name. He had forwarded it without comment. She added it to the folder. On a Thursday evening, exactly 44 days after the first bank alert, Lena sat Daniel down. She did not yell, she did not throw things, she did not even raise her voice. She set the folder on the table between them, she opened it and she walked him through each page one at a time, the transfer records, the totals, the apartment booking confirmation, the property record showing his refinance attempt, the photos. She spoke in a voice that she had been told years ago was her professional voice, the one she used when delivering difficult news to tenants. Calm, factual, and completely immovable. Daniel cycled through his responses in what felt like rapid sequence. First was confusion. He said he did not know what she was looking at. Second was deflection. He said the transfers were for something he was managing for his brother, which was a story he invented on the spot and which collapsed when she pointed to the apartment booking made in his name only. Third was anger. He raised his voice and told her she had no right to go through his accounts, which she allowed him to say before pointing out that they were joint accounts, which his name was also on, and that therefore they were equally hers. Fourth was a plea. He became quiet, he looked at the table, he said it had been a mistake, he said he was sorry. He said he had gotten lost and made terrible decisions and he could fix it. He said he still loved her. He said they could start over. Lena looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the woman at the apartment entrance. She thought about the grocery bag, the comfortable ease between them. She thought about $41,000, about an apartment rented for 11 months while he slept in their bed, about her name missing from a refinance application on a house she had bled for. She said, I know you believe that. I also believe that you will always be the most important person in your own story. I am not a chapter in that story anymore. Then she told him she had already spoken to an attorney, that the process was already underway, and that she would be filing within the week. His face changed completely. This was the part she had braced for, not the sadness, the calculation. She could see it moving behind his eyes, the quick reassessment of every angle, the same quality that had made him good at sales and had made him good at lying for 6 years. He asked about the house. She told him Patricia was handling it. He asked about the joint account. She told him she had already removed her contributions. He asked who else knew. She told him that was not his concern. He asked if there was anything he could do. She said, return the $41,000 to the joint account before the asset review begins. It will be less complicated for you if you do. He said he did not have $41,000. She said, then it will be part of the legal process. She stood up, picked up her folder, and went to the bedroom. She had already moved her most important documents, personal files, her grandmother's deed transfer letter, her financial records, and her backup copies of everything into a locked drawer at her office 2 weeks earlier. She had not left anything in the house that she needed to protect. That night, Daniel slept on the couch. He did not fight it. The filing happened 6 days later. What followed was the part that Lena had expected in theory, but that still managed to sting in practice. The phone calls from Daniel's family. His mother called first, the woman Lena had paid a deposit to visit, the woman Lena had always been kind to, warm to, who had sat at Lena's table on holidays and eaten. Lena's cooking. She called to tell Lena she was being unreasonable, that marriages required forgiveness, that Daniel was going through something difficult and Lena was abandoning him at the worst time. Lena listened to the entire speech without interrupting. When it ended, she said, I understand this is painful for your family. I hope you have a good evening. Then she ended the call. Daniel's sister called the next day and left a voicemail that Lena saved. The sister said that Lena had always been cold, that she had never really fit into their family, and that it was not surprising that she would walk away the moment things got hard. It was a remarkable voicemail given that Lena had never missed a birthday, a holiday, or a family event in 6 years and had personally organized Daniel's mother's 60th birthday dinner at her own expense. She saved that voicemail and sent a copy to Patricia. The responses from Lena's own circle were different. Rita came over with food and sat with her on the floor of the living room and did not say anything dramatic. She just stayed. Lena's coworker Jasmine, who had known something was wrong for months but had not pushed, texted to say she was proud of her and that anyone who had watched Lena work knew she was the most capable person in any room she entered. Even Carol from the legal department stopped Lena in the hallway and said, without knowing any details, that Lena looked different, more like herself. That was the phrase that caught in Lena's chest, more like herself. She had not realized how far from herself she had gone. The legal process moved. Patricia was skilled and thorough. The dissipation claim for the $41,000 was filed as part of the asset division. Because Daniel could not produce the money or document where it had gone in a way that qualified as marital expense, the court factored it into the settlement calculation. The house was assessed. Both names were on the title, which protected Lena from the refinance attempt Daniel had made. Because that attempt had failed and no transfer of title had occurred, both parties had equal standing. Daniel could not afford to buy out Lena's share of the house. Lena could. She had been quietly saving for 4 years into an account Daniel did not know about, because Lena had always been the kind of person who kept an emergency fund, a habit her father had instilled in her long before she understood why it mattered. Between that savings account, the settlement factoring in the dissipation amount, and her clean credit history, she was able to secure a buyout mortgage in her name only. Daniel moved out on a Tuesday. He took what the agreement specified, no more. Patricia had been precise and Lena had been precise, and the agreement left very little room for argument. He stood in the driveway on his last trip with boxes and looked at Lena on the porch and said something she had not expected. He said, you were always the best thing in my life. I just did not know how to handle something real. She did not respond with anger. She did not respond with warmth either. She said, I know, and I hope you figure it out. Then she went inside. The months that followed were quieter than Lena had expected. She had braced for devastation, for the collapse that people described after long marriages ended. What she felt instead was something closer to volume being turned down. The noise she had not realized she was living inside simply stopped. She started sleeping 8 hours. She started cooking things she liked rather than things Daniel preferred. She started leaving work at a reasonable hour instead of filling the evenings she dreaded going home to. She started calling Rita on Tuesday nights just to talk. She noticed that the house felt bigger, which she had expected. What she had not expected was that it also felt more like hers than it ever had. She repainted the kitchen a color she had always wanted and that Daniel had vetoed. A deep blue, almost the color of deep water. She put up photos she had taken herself, landscapes and cities, shots she had collected on work trips and weekends away that had never made it onto the walls because she had always deferred to what fit the shared aesthetic. She started a small vegetable garden in the backyard, not because it made financial sense, just because she wanted to. About 4 months after the divorce was finalized, Daniel called. She let it go to voicemail. He said he needed to talk to her about something important regarding the property and could she call him back. She forwarded the voicemail to Patricia and asked if there was anything outstanding. Patricia confirmed there was not. She texted Daniel, "All property matters should go through my attorney. Her number is on file." He called again a week later. This time she answered because she was curious in the way you are curious about a story you know the ending of but want to confirm. He said the woman from the apartment had FT him. He said the apartment lease had ended and he was renting a room from a coworker. He said things had gotten complicated with money. He said he had been thinking a lot and he wondered if Lena would consider talking. Not about the divorce, he said quickly, just talking. Lena sat with the phone and thought about the folder. She thought about $41,000. She thought about the refinance attempt. She thought about his mother's phone call telling her she was abandoning him. She said, "Daniel, I genuinely wish you a good life. I mean that, but I am not the person to help you figure out what comes next. I have my own next to figure out." He was quiet and then he said he understood. She said goodbye and ended the call and sat at her kitchen table under the window that looked out onto the back garden where the first small green shoots were starting to come up in the raised bed. She had built herself one weekend with materials from the hardware store and a tutorial she had watched 4 times until she understood it. She made coffee, she sat with it. Outside the window, the garden was doing what it was supposed to do. About 6 months later, Daniel's mother called again. The tone was entirely different this time. She was not calling to defend Daniel, she was calling because she needed help. Her health had been declining for several months and she had not been managing her own paperwork well and she had always, she said with what sounded like real difficulty, trusted Lena more than anyone else in the family with things like that. Lena felt the pull of old patterns, the part of her that had always shown up, always helped, always made herself useful even when it cost her. She felt it like a familiar undertow. She was kind, she was warm. She told Daniel's mother she was sorry to hear about her health and she hoped she was getting good care. She said she was no longer in a position to help manage family matters given everything that had happened, but she offered the name of a local elder care coordination service she knew was reliable from her work in property management. The woman said she had hoped Lena would do it personally. Lena said, "I know, I am sorry, I cannot. Take good care of yourself." She meant both things. A few weeks after that call, Lena ran into Daniel's sister at a grocery store. The sister who had left the voicemail calling Lena cold and unsuited to their family. They were in the same aisle and there was no avoiding it. The sister looked surprised and then faintly embarrassed. She said Lena's name as a kind of opener without knowing what to follow it with. Lena smiled. She said hello. She asked if the sister was doing well. The sister said yes and then after a pause said she had probably been too harsh in that voicemail. She said things had been stressful and she had taken Daniel's side without hearing both sides. Lena said, "Thank you for saying that." She did not say it was fine, it was not fine, and pretending it was would have been a kindness that cost her more than the other person deserved. But she also did not need to hold on to it. She had the voicemail, she had the evidence, she had the house and the garden and the deep blue kitchen, she had her savings, she had her full name on her own mortgage, she had Rita on Tuesday nights, she had more than enough. She put 2 items in her cart and said it was nice to see the sister, and she meant that with approximately 30% sincerity, which was enough to get through an accidental grocery store encounter with her dignity intact. She pushed her cart toward the next aisle. There was one more thing that happened, almost a year after the divorce finalized, that Lena had not expected, and that changed the way she understood the whole story. A woman reached out to her through a work contact. Her name was not one Lena recognized, but the message she sent was careful and honest. She said she had been in a situation involving the same man, not the woman from the apartment, but earlier around the time Lena and Daniel had been married for 3 years. She had not known Lena existed, or rather she had been told something about Lena that made her believe the marriage was functionally over. She had ended things when she found out the truth, she said. She had felt terrible about it for a long time. She wanted Lena to know if it mattered that she had been deceived as well. Lena read the message twice. She thought about how long Daniel had been building and maintaining and running that system, before the apartment, before the transfers, running different versions of the same story in different rooms for different people. She wrote back to the woman. She said, "Thank you for telling me, I believe you, I hope you are well." She added nothing angry, she asked nothing invasive, The woman had done something that cost her something, reaching out at all, and Lena was not going to make that harder. She pressed send and set her phone down. She was in her car. Chen, the walls were deep blue. The afternoon light was coming in at an angle she had come to associate with the particular piece of a Tuesday afternoon when work was finished, and there was nowhere she needed to be and nothing she needed to pretend. She thought about her mother's saying one more time, "Good people endure quietly and the world eventually notices." She sat with it and realized she had been understanding it wrong for her entire life. The point was not the enduring. The point was never the enduring. Patience was only a virtue when it was pointed in the right direction, toward something growing, not toward something draining. The world noticing was not the reward. The reward was the moment you stopped waiting for the world to notice and started noticing yourself. Lena had spent 6 years proving she was worth staying for to a person who had already decided how he was going to use her. She had carried the whole weight of a marriage that was not a marriage. She had paid for things she would never get back. She had smoothed over things that should have been confronted. She had given the benefit of the doubt so many times that the doubt had become its own kind of home. And then she had stopped. Not in a single dramatic moment, not in one screaming confrontation, not in a big public scene. She had stopped quietly, methodically, strategically, and with evidence in a manila folder and a very good attorney and a savings account in her own name. She had not needed to destroy him. She had not needed to call his family and tell them everything. She had not needed to post anything or perform her pain for anyone. The truth had done its own work in its own time. The apartment was empty. The woman was gone. The money he had taken was accounted for in the settlement. The house was hers. She was exactly where she needed to be. The garden was doing well. Lena was doing better. She had learned something in those months of quiet watching and careful documenting and slow strategic movement that no one had ever told her directly but that she now understood completely. Your patience is an asset. Protect it like one. Give it to things and people that grow. The moment you realize you are spending it on something that only takes, you have already waited long enough. She picked up her phone and called Rita. Rita answered on the second ring the way she always did, and Lena told her what had happened with the woman who had messaged her. Rita listened without interrupting. When Lena finished, Rita was quiet for a moment and then said, "You know what the most remarkable thing about you is?" Lena asked what. Rita said, "You did all of that, every single part of it, and you still came out of it with yourself intact. That is the hardest thing. Most people lose themselves somewhere in the middle of a story like yours. You did not." Lena did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, "I almost did. That is why I had to stop when I did." She walked out to the back porch with her coffee. The garden was green and quiet in the evening light. Everything that was in it was there because she had put it there. Everything that was still there had survived because it was strong enough or because she had taken care of it well enough or both. She thought that was a fine enough way to think about what came next. She thought that was a fine enough way to think about herself. If Lena's story hit you somewhere real, here is what is worth thinking about tonight. She did not leave the moment she felt something was wrong. She left when she had built something solid enough to stand on. And that is the part no one talks about in these stories. The leaving is not the brave part. The building is the brave part. The quiet, unnoticed, private work of putting together the truth and the plan and the evidence and the exit before the other person even realizes the door is open. If you have ever stayed too long in something that was slowly draining you, or if you are watching someone you love do exactly that, this story was for you. Leave a comment below, tell me what you would have done differently or what you think Lena got exactly right. And if you're still in the middle of your own story, know that the middle is where it gets heavier before it gets lighter. That is not a sign you're failing, that is a sign you're almost through.